good afternoon, whatever time of day it is when you guys are joining. So I'm going to talk about something a little bit weird now. This is a little bit weird now. Those of you know, I've got friends who I consider family who live in Ukraine. I've been operating out there since 2013. I've been out there for quite a while now. Right now in Ukraine, they are experiencing something very strange. And I was speaking to my friend last night, and he was saying, look, Sean, this cold is something different. I said, what do you mean? He said, it's cold in Ukraine. It gets cold in the winter, but never this deep and never for this long. He says, you know, he's lived there almost 50, maybe 50 years now. And he says he can't remember it ever being as cold as it is right now for a prolonged period. Now, just for context, the daytime temperature in Ukraine is hovering around -13. Nighttime temperature is hovering around -20. Yes, of course, it might skip to -21, -22. It might be -18. I think the warmest, so, shorts and t-shirt weather that my friend has experienced in Ukraine over the last couple, maybe month now, it's been -8. And he's been telling me it's just not normal. And I was having a conversation with him last night, and I said, what do you think it is? Could it be a weather weapon? And he paused and he said, I don't know, but it's not normal. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a rundown, a little bit of a monologue on whether this could be a weather weapon or not. Now, first of all, before I go into this, whether you think, oh, Sean, you're being woo-woo, that's totally wild. Let me ask you guys this. Do you think weather can be manipulated? Well, that's an astounding yes. Okay. We know that they do this all the time in Dubai. They did it allegedly in China for, I can't remember when it was, but for the Winter Olympics, they modified the weather so it didn't snow, or I can't remember what it was, but you guys, all this stuff's in open source, open source media. You can literally search it. So we know that weather can be manipulated. That's a given. There was an incident in the United Kingdom in the 50s where there was a massive flash flood. A lot of people died, and it turns out at that time they were doing weather experiments. So if you're the military, right, and you find out that you can manipulate the weather, you can make it rain, make it snow, stop it rain, stop it snowing, would it not be the next logical, the next logical step to try and make it cold, try and make it warm? Clearly, that is an advantage for your military. Now, after I've given my opening monologue, I'm going to come on to two things. There's going to be two things that we will or will not see in the near future. And if those things happen, then that is clearly, that puts the probability of a weather weapon being used in Ukraine, that puts it quite high. So before I get into this, ladies and gentlemen, if you've not done so already, please like, follow, subscribe, share my stuff. I think I'm going to start coming on in the afternoon and doing doing a live stream that doesn't really fit into my normal, talking about the conflicts, because I do think that there is certainly a lot of weird things that are happening. But make sure you like, follow, and subscribe, ladies and gentlemen, and throw a comment in the chat if you will. So I'm just going to get on with this, and then I'll come on to the chat. So, ladies and gentlemen of the United Kingdom, or wherever it is you're watching this, as you're sipping your tea, we've got plus. I sent in my so my friend sent me a screenshot of the weather. Let me see what it was. Hang on. Sorry, I'm just getting this up. So he sent me a screenshot. I can't share that with you because it's got its name on it. So Monday the 19th, -10, -10's the warmest it's going to be. That's the warmest it's going to be. It's just it's constant cold. It's not going like a -8 is the warmest it's been for a while. So as we're sat here in +6 or 7 degrees thinking, oh, it's chilly. And while the government is sending billions in aid to Ukraine, listen up, because what I'm about to tell you might just freeze the blood in your veins, colder than a Siberian wind, the Siberian wind blasting through Kiev right now. You've all seen the headlines. Ukraine gripped by the harshest winter in years. Temperatures plunging to minus 20x. Power grid shattered by Russian missiles, leaving millions huddling in the darkness. Frostbitten and desperate. CNN showing screens in Kiev at minus 14. Al Jazeera reporting on emergency blackouts as the mercury drops like a stone. It's not just bad luck, it's biblically apocalyptic cold out there right now. Rivers are turning to ice, homes are turning to tombs. But wait, is this Mother Nature's cruel joke or something far more sinister, potentially orchestrated by the Kremlin? And we're going to explore that now a little bit. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, the Russians do really well in cold temperatures. Russian tanks operate fine on hard ground. So right now in Ukraine, for those of you who don't know, it has a high water table. What that means is very good for growing food, not very good for tanks going over those fields. When it's frozen and there's just thick ice, those Russian tanks can literally, it's like concrete. The whole area is like concrete. When you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 feet of ice, those Russian tanks can go straight over the top of that. And I'll come on to some key triggers that we may or may not see in the future. So think about it. My skeptical Brits, maybe sat there with your tinfoil hats on. We've heard the whispers. We've seen the declassified documents, the wild theories that never quite get debunked. Russia, Putin's empire in the shadows. Have they been tinkering with weather manipulation? What do we think? Do we think the Russians do, or do we think it's just do you think it's just Western governments that can tinker with the weather? I would say there's a high likelihood that the Russians can manipulate and alter weather. I don't think that's beyond the reach of a good old conspiracy. Remember cloud seeding, remember electromagnetic pulses ripping through the atmosphere, remember the meltdown at Chernobyl. There's a huge array outside Chernobyl and nobody really knows what it's for. HARP style technology hidden in hidden in Russia, hidden in the Arctic. I do think this may, look guys, and this is just me saying it. This is this video is total speculation. There is a reason why the Ukrainians went into Russia and they went into the region that they did. Now, there is a huge nuclear power plant in that region. And every time I see a big nuclear power plant, I always think, what else is that? What else is that powering? What other military applications does that nuclear power plant have? We don't know. I don't know. So the Russians have bragged about it in state media. They're controlling the rain for parades, or they could have droughts for enemies. And now, as Ukraine's energy infrastructure absolutely crumbles under bombardments timed perfectly with this polar vortex, could it be that the Russians have flipped the switch on some sort of counter weapon, a direct freeze weapon or something? I would say it's not beyond the realms of possibility. This could be engineered to turn Ukraine's famous black soil from a muddy quagmire to a rock-hard highway. Oh, look, we want a rock-hard highway for big invasion with big tanks rolling. Look, before you roll your eyes, all right, history's on my side here. Military analysts have long known that winter in those parts isn't a hindrance. It's an absolute gift for the Russians. General Mudd retreats, they say, and Marshal Frost marches on. So frozen ground means no more tanks bogged down in the east of Ukraine. That slush that stalled the army since Napoleon the cold weather opens the door. The cold weather really does open a door for a huge Russian offensive. It lets heavy armor roll where it couldn't before. So all these defensive checkpoints on roads, on key junctions, they don't matter anymore. That does not matter anymore, because those fortifications and checkpoints on the roads, the Russians are just going to go past them. So that's what it means. The Atlantic Council just days ago noted Ukraine's fortifications are choking Russian advances. But with the earth iced over, Russia's tanks can just go straight over the cross of it, can cross straight over it. Literally, you're talking now from Donbass to the Dnipro. It is one straight road. Imagine, right? Imagine initially, certainly back in 2022, and look, guys, I've been watching this, I've been living this since 2013. So every winter, I understand the weather, I understand the dynamics, I understand what's going to happen, I understand when the pushes are going to come. Like back in 2022, politically, the Russians had to go. They didn't have a choice. It was the Biden administration. If they left it till the next year, it would have been worse. Because they would have only had 3 years. The fact that they went in 2022, Biden's first year in office, that gave them 4 years before Trump came in. Now, that was letting the politics there dictated the military. Now we were having this, 2022, it was a mild winter. 23 was a mild winter. 24 was a mild winter. 25, well, I guess this is 25 winter initial. 25, 26 winter, boom, frozen like rock. So you can imagine the initial battlefield, right? You're having to plan your routes, your movements. You're having to let the ground dictate, because you can't move. You just can't get heavy tanks through that mud, right? So you have to go on roads. Those roads are easily identifiable. They're easily mined, easily stopped by drones. Now, maybe 6 feet of ice, hard ice like rock. Literally the whole place now is like a concrete, the whole place is like concrete. You can just ride over wherever you want. So Russian tanks could be grabbing more land while Zelensky's forces shiver in their trenches. And who's to say that this deep freeze isn't man-made? Those power outages aren't random. They're synchronized with the cold snap. They really were. If you think about it, I'm not making this up. Think about when that big strike went into Kiev. It was timed perfectly with this cold snap. Right at the beginning, it was. I'm not making that up. That is didactic fact. Again, could be coincidence. And I'll come on to two key triggers. 2 key triggers that are going to say to me this was the likelihood of this being a weather weapon goes up. So those power, like I said, they're not random. The power outages are not random. It was Putin amplifying the suffering to break the spirit, to clear the path for another land grab, potentially. New York Times paints Kiev as an icy plateau. But what if it's a calculated canvas painted by Russian scientists in some underground lab? So we've poured our taxes into weapons for Ukraine. We are standing shoulder to shoulder against tyranny. But if this cold is a weapon, a stealthy, deniable act of war, then what next? Like literally, how do you defeat the cold? What weapons can we send to defeat the cold? I'm pretty sure you can't defeat the cold with your rifles. I don't know. Maybe you can. Will the wind shift west, chilling the North Sea rigs or the Channel? Or is this a prelude to a bigger push with our lads in NATO caught off guard? And look, let's just be clear, all right? The British military are not prepared to fight a war in this type of weather. Not a chance. I don't want to use the phrase lambs to the slaughter, but I can't think of a better one. So I ask you, could this brutal weather be some sort of Russian weapon designed to freeze the ground solid and enable their tanks to surge forward in yet another land grab? Connect the dots, guys. Literally connect the dots. Now, this may all well be coincidence, or it may be a weather weapon. Right now, there's some things that are really coincidental. The airstrikes that Russia gave, the drone strike and the missile strike a couple of weeks ago that took out Kiev, basically took out the heating in Kiev. The mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, the boxer, he's the mayor of Kiev, and he said, right, half of the city is without heating. Evacuate if you can. Get out to the countryside where people have got log burners, their own gas supply, and because I don't know when we can get this back on. And that's when the cold snap happened. Now, there's no sign of this cold breaking at the moment. So if we see, and these are the two triggers that I'm gonna throw out there. If we see in the next couple of days, or whenever it happens, if we see the Russian tanks start to move, if the Russian tanks start to move forwards, and then the weather just becomes, the temperature just becomes reasonable, like zero, that to me would say that the Russians knew it was coming, they planned for it to come in, and they wanted to maximize on that chaos and on that carnage, because you don't want the weather to be too bad for you. So like if you're doing the reason people do dawn raids, right? So it's kind of like doing a dawn raid, but with like a dawn weather raid when the weather's breaking. So if you're doing a dawn raid, and most militaries do dawn raids, the reason you do it at dawn, like literally just before first light, or as soon as the light starts to break, that's when you start your attack. Now, the reason you do that is because you get all the advantages of catching the bad guys off guard, but then you get that advantage of being able to see as well, because it's literally first light. I get it, some people wear night vision goggles and everything, but look, guys, I'll be quite real with you guys. It's a lot easier to operate in daylight than it is at nighttime with those night vision goggles on, because those night vision goggles, they are great, they are fantastic, but when you're running, you're out of breath, you can't, they are difficult to work with. Right, let me jump up and get some comments. James is saying, Europe is backing Zelensky, but Trump has pulled the rug on them, and I reckon they literally don't know which way to turn. I said this was coming, guys, like over a year ago. I said, you're seeing the diversions, and the United States are not going to be involved in that sort of stuff. Jeremiah is saying, anyone remember Waterloo? Well, like, Waterloo, I don't know. Right, okay. I don't know what that was. I don't know what that means. Right. I'm going to jump up and get some comments. James is saying, sure, wasn't Zelensky just calling for a ceasefire to fix something on the nuclear power station in Ukraine? So the nuclear, okay, so I think are you talking about Chernobyl? So the nuclear power plant at Chernobyl, it's the sarcophagus it's been damaged since 2022. So the sarcophagus, so the nuclear power plant at Chernobyl, it's got like a big, it's covered in concrete, and there's a big like protective dome over that concrete. That was damaged in 2022. I think that may be, I think that's what you may be talking about. I don't know. There's quite a few strange things about Chernobyl. First of all, what was Chernobyl actually powering? I could argue that Chernobyl was actually powering a non-nuclear EMP. That's what I could argue. Also, back in when Zelensky took over from office, the government in Ukraine, they started to renovate the roads from Chernobyl down to Kiev. Now, people in Ukraine were wondering, why are they doing that? Why are the Ukrainians spending so much money, time, effort, resources on this? Well, it turns out when the Russians came in from Belarus, it turns out they came, they literally used the roads that had just been built. So there's a little bit of a rabbit hole if you guys want to go down that. Rod is saying tanks are obsolete in today's drone warfare battlefield. You don't need to be able to get your shotgun trained on an incoming drone quickly. If you miss, you need to be able to bail out quickly. I don't think tanks are obsolete, guys. I don't. I've had this. I go through this quite a lot. These things here. These are the drones we're talking about, right? These little quadcopter ones. I had to get this up because we all talk about drones, don't we? We always talk about drones. And there's like, for me, there's 3 different types, right? There's these ones, which are like, these ones are replacing artillery. These ones are replacing artillery. These ones are slow cruise missiles. And these ones are just like reconnaissance airplanes that like stay in the air for a long time. So when Rod Panhard is saying tanks are obsolete, I don't think tanks are obsolete. I really don't. What these drones are doing is they're replacing artillery, but they're not replacing it better. They're just replacing it. So if you've got good artillery, I would say good artillery is better than those drones, because think about it, right? And I'm gonna give you guys the Raven maps now, okay? You've all seen the footage, haven't you? 200,000 pound tank. Well, not even 200, maybe like £1 million tank is destroyed by $1,000 drone. Yeah, that is the case, but that's not the whole story. You've got to understand the kill chain and the workup behind that. So while yes, drones are taking out tanks, you know, at distance, you've got to understand how they're working. So if you think these things are traveling at like 60 kilometers an hour max, just use 60 kilometers an hour, okay? Like I get it, some may claim to move faster, whatever. If we use 60 kilometers an hour, it's easy to calculate. So, and that's not far off the mark either. So if you're using that as your benchmark, right? If you're using that as your benchmark, then that means that you and these little drones are flown by the guys with the goggles on, right? You know, the FPV drones. So you've got these drones now, and one drone, one operator. So he's sat there with his FPV goggles on. Now, if you think that they're taking, I don't know, a kilo of explosives, 20 kilometers, it takes at least 20 minutes to get that 1 kilo of explosives to the tank. Now, I know that people have seen this we've all seen the FPV footage, right, of the things going in. You don't see the rest of you don't see the rest behind that. You don't just send one, you send maybe 5 or 6, maybe 6, 7, you know. You send a lot of those things to go out to attack these tanks, right? Because if one fails or one's not going to do that much damage, you want multiple strikes on these tanks, right? So let's just say you're sending 5. Okay, that means you have to have 5 guys sat there with FPV goggles on. You know, that's the reality. Okay. How many, and you know, so you get 5 kilos of explosives on one tank and it takes 20 minutes. That's the maths, right? That is the bare minimum. It actually takes a lot longer than that, but we'll go with 20 minutes. So now you think about those 5 guys, if they were operating an artillery, you know, an artillery piece, how much artillery could they get on that location in 20 minutes? It's a lot more than 5 kilos, right? So the reason the Ukrainians are having to use these drones, and they're not a disruptive technology. They're a new technology and they are changing the battlefield, but they're not changing the battlefield in a disruptive way. Sorry, guys. Let me jump down. Ops 69 is saying they don't exactly control the weather. I think they manipulate it. Well, I don't know. Listen, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I think we're going to find there's going to be two key factors come out very soon. All right. So for those two key factors to fit in place, we've got to understand what happened here. Okay. So here we had the Russians striking the Ukrainian energy grid and their heating systems just before this cold weather hit. All right. That happened. 100% that happened. There's no arguing there, right? That happened. Right. Now, if we look at the end of this, if we predict the future, if we try and predict the future, if we say the Russians did a land grab just at the right time, just as the weather was changing, then that would give that would raise the probability of this being some sort of weather, some sort of weather weapon. Rod Panhard is saying the Russians are not using tanks as tanks. Yeah, I agree. They're not. They're using them like, I guess, as fire bases. But that's what tanks are, fire bases. The Russians are not yet. So, yeah. Have you seen the tanks right now in Ukraine? They've got like these big cages on them. And I don't think we're seeing the end. I don't think we're seeing the end of tanks, guys. I really don't. I don't think we're seeing the end of tanks. Drones have changed 100%. Drones have changed the battlefield, these ones. But they've not changed it and given anyone an advantage. All they've done really is replace artillery. And they've not replaced it better. They've just replaced it. Slim Yin is saying, when I was a lad, we would have called it a snap and pulled our woolly socks on. Right, Slim Yin. Right, Slim Yin, with all due respect, okay? My friend who lives in Kiev, he's lived there 50 years, right? He's lived there 50 years, and he says he's never had temperatures like this. You kind of can't just pull your socks on. This is consistently, the weather in Ukraine is consistently below -10. Yes, it might come up, to like -8 or -9, but for I think maybe the last month, it's certainly for the last month at night times, it's been hitting almost -20, and this is for a long time. This is for a consistent time. Now, I've been out in Ukraine, and I've been saying, the coldest I've ever felt has been in Ukraine, and it was -26. But it was only for a couple of days. The consistency and the length of this cold in Ukraine, that's what I'm talking about. So yes, you may think that you can put an extra pair of socks on, but trust me, guys, it doesn't work like that. Yeah, who's saying that? Yeah, I would I think okay, so from me, as somebody who's always been light infantry, I think moving fast is a lot better than. I don't like tanks. I think they're too heavy, they're too slow. But then if you meet a tank person, if you meet somebody who's been in a tank regiment, they will say, oh, I don't want to be in that soft-skinned vehicle, and I'm like, absolutely not. I want to get in I want to move really fast. It's always better to be fast. And Rod is saying, Western media is slagging off the Russians for using motorbikes, trucks, even golf carts, claiming they have no tanks left, but these are better. Yes, listen. Rod, you don't have to sell this to me, Rod. Do you know what? And another thing that what this actually does is, okay, so let's read let's explore the comment. Western media is slagging off the Russians for using motorbikes, trucks, or even golf carts, claiming they have no tanks left. Okay, so okay, so if you're going to go into a country, right? And, and send all your tanks, those tanks are getting blown up. Right. There's so many different aspects on this. What we're seeing here is land pirates, right? You know, I've been warning about land pirates coming across Europe. This is exactly what it is, right? So now the Western media will not be laughing when those people using stolen bikes, stolen vehicles, golf carts, repurposed 4x4s are storming into Europe. They're going, look at these guys. Look at these guys taking our towns and cities. They don't even have tanks. Yeah, that's not going to be funny for people in Poland, people in Finland, when they're storming through the cities. Western media are about to have a big wake-up call. Can anyone give any facts on the matter? Right, just give me a second. What facts do you want, Slim Yin? What facts do you want? I'll give you the facts that it's well known, it's well out there in most social, not social media, in most circles. I don't think people deny that weather can be manipulated. There's no argument there. They did it in Dubai, but got it really wrong a couple of months ago. Massive floods in Dubai. The Chinese manipulated the weather at the Chinese Olympics because they didn't want it to snow or something, and they wanted the weather just to be right. So we know that weather can be manipulated. I don't know if the cold can be manipulated, if cold can be used as a weapon. I don't know. That's the reality. And I'm presenting the question to you guys. Could a secret weather weapon be used in Ukraine right now? And there's going to be something that's going to happen very shortly. It may or may not happen. And we are going to find out pretty soon if this is a real thing. Right. Okay, Slim Yin. Right, let me just get facts. Right. Okay. So it's called cloud seeding, right? So it's called cloud seeding. Right. There's plenty of cloud seeding UAE. Right, I think I'm going to get hit with a paywall. Right, let me share this before the paywall comes up. So I don't know what you want as evidence or facts, but, there's plenty out there. All you need to do is hit the Google. United Arab Emirates turns to cloud seeding in a bid to secure its water future. Technique to trigger wet rainfall is one of the Gulf's boldest climate adaptation projects. Wherever so this is for you, Slim. So Slim, do you accept that what I'm showing you now is weather manipulation? Slim, are you on? Is Slim still on? I don't know if Slim's on. Right, Slim, do you accept that what that is that is not a conspiracy? That is, the United Arab Emirates are turning, are cloud seeding, basically. They're making it rain. So, Slim, if you're still on, I don't know if Slim's still on, but Slim is asking for facts. So, Slim, right, Slim's still on. There he is, right. They can use cement dust also. I don't know what that means. Slim, are you dead? Slim, are you drunk? Slim, are you drunk? Right, Slim. Right, okay, Slim. So are you saying that cloud seeding is not controlling the global weather? What is it doing then? What is cloud seeding? Is it controlling the weather? And if it's not controlling the global weather, where is it? What weather is it controlling? Like Martian weather? Like if seed clouding isn't right, Slim. With respect, like I think I really think you need to like look into this. Slim, I mean, no disrespect to you, mate, but are you actually seriously saying that cloud seeding isn't controlling the weather? Are you seriously saying that? And global weather, all weather is global. Like, you don't get non-global weather. You know, everywhere on Earth is global. So if you can control the weather in one place, you can control it anywhere, right? Because it's all global. I don't know how to, like, you know, I don't know how you can, like, right. I can't continue with that. Right. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you're joining for the first time, I have been talking about, could a secret weather weapon be used in Ukraine? First of all, I don't know. What I do know is that Ukraine is being hit by an absolutely once in a lifetime cold spell. My friend who lives out there, he's lived there for 50 years. Right. Okay. So Darren Lamont is saying no evidence that cloud. Right. Okay. I'm not talking about cloud seeding. Okay. I'm not talking about cloud seeding. What I'm saying is, right. Okay. 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, if I'd have said to you guys, the government can make it rain, you would have called me a conspiracy theorist, right? You would have said it's crazy. So what I'm saying is, this is what I'm saying, right? We know that weather manipulation happens, okay? We know that happens, all right? We know it happens. There's plenty of evidence, but now people are, oh, no, that's not evidence, right? So when you're there with the military, right, and you're planning these things, and you're like, right, okay, so, yeah, we can make it rain. Oh, what else can we do? I'm talking about the advanced cold weather. Is there something there that can make the weather just absolutely go freezing cold? Right. Listen, guys, this is only going to be a short live stream, right? So my question I'm proposing to you guys is, has a secret weather weapon been used in Ukraine? All right. Has one been used? We are going to find out pretty soon, because I don't know if this is a thing, if the Russians make a massive land grab just before the weather breaks, I would say that gives it a high probability that a weather weapon has been used. I'm throwing it out there, guys. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to close this down now. You guys have been absolutely fantastic, and thank you for challenging me. Thank you for challenging me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I appreciate the challenges. I'm going to close this down now. I'll be back on later on my normal time. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and keep an eye on the weather. And keep an eye on those tanks, guys, and I'll bid you good afternoon.